Good evening. It's great seeing such a large turnout this evening. My name is Joe Vidunas. I'm Hanover County's traffic engineer, and I'm going to get this started with a presentation. We're going to have a brief presentation, and then I'm going to follow that up with some opportunities for questions and answers, and then after that we can break into one-on-one sessions. We have a lot of staff here to show you the plans and take questions, hear your comments, and so forth. Again, thank you for coming. We really appreciate you being here. We want to hear from you. Before I get started, though, I'd like to point out we have a couple folks in the audience, Mr. Davidson, who is the board member for the Beaver Dam District, and Ms. Iverson, who is the Planning Commission representative, sitting right there. We also, like I said, have a good deal of staff here. So in addition to myself, would the county folks raise their hands so everybody can see who you are? Okay. And then we have a couple members of our consultant team, Clark Nexon. You guys, there you go. So we're good. I'm going to go ahead and sit down. I'm going to try to talk without the mic, but if you think it's not loud enough, I'll go back to this. All right, so, obviously we're here to talk about plans for the Route 1, Route 30 intersection. I imagine all of you are familiar with that intersection or you wouldn't be here. Basically, two main objectives tonight. First and foremost, we want to share with you what our plans are for the intersection, and then we want to hear from you. We want your input. There's a lot of ways that you can provide input, and I'll review that at the very end, but we have comment cards and opportunities to email and so forth. I'll go over that later. So again, this is the intersection. We have Route 1, which is a primary highway, 4-lane undivided roadway, carries roughly 4,400 vehicles a day. It is connected to Route 30, which is a 2-lane primary highway that connects to the interstate and then further to the east to 301. This is a view looking to the north with Route 30 coming in on the right side. The intersection is currently controlled with flashing signals. It's a yield condition on Route 1, and you have the flashing red stop condition for the Route 30 leg. So again, this is the view from above under its current conditions. Admittedly, you're not going to be able to see the orange lines, but the orange lines will show up on the display in the back. The orange lines represent the existing right-of-way and property boundaries. So what's the issue? The issue that we're trying to solve are the kind of episodic worst case conditions, I guess, for backup. We see it, I apologize. Backups that we occasionally see, particularly when the interstate bogs down. We'll see this, and when Kings Dominion is in season, we'll also see this. Some pretty significant delays. Our analysis, looking again at kind of a worst case scenario, showed delays up to 10 minutes. Okay, that's not every day, and that wasn't the situation when I drove through coming to this meeting, but at times it will be that bad. And so that really is kind of the essence or the heart of the issue that we were looking at. So we did look at several options, and the option that really appeared to rise to the top was something that's called a continuous green T, or in this case would be a signalized green T. We looked at some other things. We looked at a roundabout. We looked at something that's called a displaced left turn. And honestly, I don't think I can explain what that is, but I know the guys in the back of the room could tell you about a displaced left turn. This particular option, the green T option, really kind of accomplished a couple things very well. One of the things that it did was it allowed kind of a minimization of right-of-way. It's possible that we may not need any right-of-way to construct this. So that's clearly an advantage. It does a very good job at dealing with the issue, the traffic, at processing that, and I'll explain in a few minutes why it's so good at moving traffic. And then it also is it's a safer, there's some safety benefits to this option as well, and I'll explain those when we look at this option. So this is just a conceptualized version of a green T. So this is not intended to be representative exactly of 30 and Route 1, but it basically will work the same. So what we have here is, well, one of the things that really makes this different is than a standard signalized intersection is that this particular lane, in our case, this would be the southbound movement, becomes a free-flowing movement. In other words, it's not controlled. It will be allowed to go free flow at all times. The other movements would be controlled by a signal here. Okay, and so what that does is it frees up some of the green time. In other words, these movements can be more efficient because there's more green time allocated to these movements because you're not having to deal with this southbound movement. The other feature that is really kind of significant about this is that there's this divider that's provided, and it provides protection for southbound left turn movement, and then also the westbound to southbound left turn movement as well. If any of you all have been through Sliding Hill, New Ash Cake recently, if you've been through that intersection, we recently constructed this very concept, and so that's a real life example that you can see, and probably driving through it will give you a better understanding than me trying to explain it to you. But so that's the concept, and this is what it looks like. And again, my apologies. I know this is very difficult to see. We have a graphic in the back, so I'm not going to try to walk through this because you can't see it. But some of the main points that I like to make is that all of the widening, like I said, will be contained within the existing right-of-way. The widening will occur to the west side of Route 1. We've separated the lanes on Route 30 to provide separate left and right turn movements, and that's also beneficial because just separating that movement, right turning movements are not going to be delayed as they are today by vehicles waiting to make that left, having to cross 4 lanes of traffic. So just simply adding that additional lane helps with the overall operations of the intersection. Along Route 1, like I said, we're providing a left turn lane, okay, which is protected, so it becomes safer. You're not sitting out in traffic. You'll be sitting in a protected left turn lane and don't have the concern that you would have today with being rear-ended. Likewise, the movement from Route 30 to southbound Route 1, same thing, we provide a receiving lane. So as you process through that intersection to head south on Route 1, you enter into a protected lane. So you don't have this concern about being sideswiped by a southbound Route 1 vehicle. So those are really kind of the safety and efficiency aspects of the project and why it is so why it's such a good solution. Along here, we're kind of showing a worst-case scenario. We have designed stormwater basins to capture the water that's coming off the roadway. I say that's worst case. It is possible that we may not need to construct those. We haven't figured that out entirely at this point. If we don't need to construct them, then obviously we won't need right-of-way. Right now, we're showing that we would need to purchase some right-of-way from the two parcels in this area. That's it in terms of right-of-way. And like I said, this is a worst-case scenario. We haven't gotten to the point to really refining that to know for sure which way we would go. If we do require the acquisition of right-of-way, we take that very, very seriously. We don't take that lightly. Our goal is to try to minimize right-of-way impacts for all properties, but unfortunately, there are times where we do need to. If we do need to acquire right-of-way, we will hire a licensed appraiser who will do an independent appraisal, and that appraisal would serve as a basis for an offer. That offer would then be presented by a right-of-way agent who would present the offer, explain the offer, explain what your rights are, and then there'd be negotiation and hopefully settlement. Our goal is to settle voluntarily with all property owners in the instances where we have to acquire right-of-way. And we'll work very hard, and we'll take as much time as necessary to try to reach a voluntary settlement. So we have more information. We actually have some brochures that explain the process that we would follow. They're available tonight. There's also information online on VDOT's website. We will follow VDOT's process for right-of-way acquisition. Probably should have led with this slide. This is essentially a zoomed-in version of what I was just showing. But again, notice the separate right and left turn lanes on 30. This is the protected left turn bay that I was referring to make that left turn movement. And then this is the left receiving lane for the southbound Route 1 movement. We'll have one free-flowing southbound lane in this direction, and then two lanes through the intersection, the northbound. One of those is a through right, and the other is just a through movement. Again, these movements here are controlled by the signal. The southbound movement is not. And then this feature along here, these are the stormwater basins that I said may or may not be needed to be determined. I've already talked a bit about the benefits, but just to kind of hammer the point home, maybe the channelization that's happening here, the protected lefts, all contribute to a safer intersection. It's more efficient. Again, splitting the lane here, allowing more green time for these movements because we've now are allowing this to go free flow, makes it more efficient, and just overall reduces travel time. So if you're southbound, you're not going to be delayed for that. This is the technical analysis that basically bears out that point. You know, I mentioned at the beginning, at times, not all times, surely, but at times there are some pretty significant delays. Under this scenario, when we run the numbers using current traffic, those delays get reduced to about 30 seconds. And then 10 years out from construction completion, it's still less than 30 seconds. It's a little bit worse, but not appreciably. So it goes from, at times, a failing condition to an overall level of service. We give grades just like school, A, B, and C, D, and so forth. It has an overall level of service of B, which is very good. This is showing a cross-section. This is a cross-section of Route 1. This is Route 30. What we're providing, and this is the southbound lane, northbound lane. So what we're showing here is the stormwater basin potentially, 9-foot shoulder, 2 foot of which would be paved, an 11-foot southbound lane. It would be separated by a 4-foot concrete median. Then we provide the left turn, southbound left turn, hatched out area here, and then the 2 northbound lanes, and again a 9-foot shoulder, 2 foot of that being paved. These dashed lines are showing the existing pavement section. So one of the things that we've accomplished here is we've tried to maximize the existing pavement. That helps save cost, and it minimizes right-of-way impact. So much of the improvement, we do have to do some widening on the west side, and that's shown right here. But the majority of the improvement is utilizing the existing pavement. Same thing for Route 30. We have approaching the intersection, we have the right and the left, and then the receiving lane going eastbound. We provide a lane, 9-foot shoulders on both sides. In terms of schedule and cost, one of the things that we like to do with our schedules and costs is be very conservative. So hopefully we've accomplished that with these schedules, because I think they are very conservative. Here we are tonight, citizen information meeting. Kind of the next major milestone in this process will be to develop the plans to what we call the 60% stage. Currently, we have the plans at about a 30% design stage, and as the plans advance, more information is included into the drawings until you get to 100% plans, which would be something that we could use for construction. Once we get to the 60% phase, we will more than likely put out a notice and see if there's an interest in holding a public hearing. We call it a willingness for a public hearing. And if there's interest, we will go ahead and hold a hearing. We may hold a hearing anyway, but that would be the next step following the plan, 60% plans.
The other thing I would point out, these will be the most modern traffic signals that VDOT now institutes, so they're all electronic. They can be changed remotely and adapted over time, so it's not like some of the old signals where you had to sit around and wait for the timing to change. They can actually adjust those timings. And even to the degree that we're starting to talk about smart traffic controls that are to benefit things like 95, so they can actually adapt these signals due to incidences on 95 so that they aren't static. So they may change even in relation to problems on 95 that definitely impacts this intersection. Yes, sir.
Those, we checked all of that. Was it done when you had a wreck on 95?
Sure.
To see what happened?
Yeah, I can't guarantee for sure, but I do not believe so.
Right.
So.
And I think
that's rough.
It is rough.
yeah, we all appreciate there will continue to be gridlock times due to, we can't wipe out all the problems associated with 95 with this project, but what we can do now with this light at this intersection is we can clear that intersection consistently so that traffic continues to flow, and we won't have the same times of just total gridlock that we've experienced.
A week or two ago, there was a backup that started at Road 30 and went all the way to Ashland.
Yes, sir.
And that was done.
We've all seen them. So this should greatly help with that. It won't fix all of the, I mean, you can only get so many things in the pipeline, but
Well, I think the light will help.
yeah, sure.
And if I can add also, the slide that Joe showed actually showed a 644-second delay. So even though we didn't do the traffic during a crash event, we sort of worked it into the simulation of what's the worst case scenario. I mean, 644-second delay, which is 10 minutes that the average person would wait in that queue to get through the light. With this new current design, it's 24 seconds or 28 seconds. So again, that's a relative comparison too. We can't guarantee it, but that's the way the modeling looks like. Is we're going to go from 10 minutes down to 30 seconds for a crash event. Maybe not a super severe one, but a typical we can actually look at.
Mr. Flagg, if we could get him to put that slide back up at the intersection again, please.
The blow up?
Okay, and the other one, that one, and move,
Yeah.
right there, and move to the north.
Oh, we can't do that.
And move to the north.
We can
Okay,
show you on the sheet back here.
and that's fine, I'll tell you about it. So when people have backup on 95, and it's a southbound issue, and they come to Route 30 to make a left, they make a right
Yes.
on shortcut
Yep.
and head north to make a left in front of the church on Pleasant Circle, to make another left to come back.
Displaced left.
Two
That's it.
things,
I know.
two things. One, a speed hump would be nice. Two, the traffic that heads north on shortcut blocks the intersection for people who are trying to go east on Pleasant Circle. And the people who are making coming south and making a left on Pleasant Circle are oftentimes caught in the middle of Route 1 and can't continue across the street because the people on shortcut are trying to get to that stop sign and they're blocking the intersection. I totally believe that this project should include whatever modifications are necessary to fix those issues over there.
And some of those, we're definitely listening to you and hearing, aware of it. We've seen it. This will greatly reduce the urge for people to do that shortcut. It won't totally eliminate it. So we will work with VDOT. I don't know that we'll be able to completely solve all those issues, but we'll definitely study them closer and see what we can do to prevent people from going through there. It could, and I don't, this would be sort of a community discussion. You'd almost have to cut it off to stop people from going through there. But here, the good news is, because of the right turn lane, it's here now, and the fact that this will clear more frequently, people won't be stacked all the way up and forced down shortcut as frequently. At least that's our goal. And that timing will be adjusted to clear that intersection, hopefully avoid that urge to cut down shortcut and then try to short circuit. Particularly those movements you mentioned where they're coming out there and then trying to go back left. Those should be entirely eliminated just because it's going to be much easier to travel this signalized intersection that goes south. Definitely hear the concerns and have experienced it, so we know that you're expressing.
Could there be a sign that said there's no through traffic starting at Shortcut Road?
We'll explore with VDOT what signage opportunities exist. VDOT, again, I mentioned earlier, we're designing it and building it, but VDOT controls the way we can do it because they have what we know as standards. They're very strict on the way they allow us to adjust signage and so forth. But we'll put it on the list for additional study and consideration to see how we can prevent that type of through-cut movement and the interactions it causes. Yes, sir.
Two questions, I guess, 2 points. How far back is that right turn lane going to go? Because right now you choke down, right? You can cross 95 to one lane. How soon do we open up to that 2-lane situation?
It's just beyond shortcut. So this is size.
Yeah, so when it backs up from the exits on 95. So you're still going to be backed up. You're still going to have people trying to make that shortcut road to their point. So to me, this really needs to address that choke point from where 95 dumps onto this road, even to the intersection. And then part 2 of my question, the point is, this green T, I like the idea, but I know what you're talking about on Apple, it has it. But that design is for trucks, for wagons, I'm assuming, going down the main artery. Here you got trucks, dump trucks, bulk trucks, you name it, left, right, east, north, south from that intersection. How are you going to do that in that compressed space?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Back to the study, we only have so many lanes, but in the case of the one at Sliding Hill, it wasn't designed for the trucks to Wegmans. It's really designed to get the folks out of the residential neighborhood. So if this is New Ashby,
Right.
it's designed to allow those people to get out. And the important part for that is being able to stop this movement here.
Right.
So by being able to stop that movement, we can clear this section here more frequently. Now,
I guess my point is, that intersection is a very compressed intersection. Versus where here, we've got tractor trailers going, a lot of tractor trailers going all directions. There, Wegmans is gonna eat up a lot of them going, well, as you said.
right, and that factors into the sizing of these lanes. But I think, part of what we'll consider further is what options VDOT has for adjusting the signal timing in process when 95 has an incident. So again, part of what we're hoping for is because this will be a sophisticated signal, that VDOT will have the option, during normal everyday traffic, and understand this is heavily truck operations because of the Burdard Quarry, among other things, logging and other things. But when 95 does its thing and starts jumping traffic on Route 1, the situation changes. So the signal timing may be need to change during that time to allow more length of relief for this segment. And the nice thing is we're never stopping this movement, so the stoplight won't be backing up traffic, because when that incident occurs, oftentimes people are getting off at Carmel Church and they're coming down Route 1. So not only do you have cars coming off at 95, you got cars coming from Carmel Church down. Well, the good news is they won't be blocked up here. They'll be free flowing. But this signal time may need to change to unload that left turn. But the point's taken. Those are the types of comments we want to hear, the observations. We'll continue to look at that as a signal design. And again, this is an early conceptual design. Yes, sir.
One of the things that is of concern to me is that, as far as I can't think of any other spot on Route 1 from Northern Virginia to Richmond where a direction goes down to one lane. And this, I think, is the only place that that's going to happen, correct? Because you are not going to have two lanes heading south and then a turn lane to the left on 30. You're actually eliminating a lane.
Now, we will continue to have dual lanes through here, but we are dedicating this lane to the left turn movement. Just hold it. So, this lane, which is a through lane, is being dedicated for the left turn movements.
Right, so we're saying that at that point in time, we only have one southbound lane on Route 1.
One full movement southbound lane, yes, sir.
How long is that turning lane? And is it blocked?
How far we run down there before it merges in with the other?
I'm talking about, like, at what point does somebody need to be in that left-hand lane and turn left at 30?
So,
If I could just take one question at a time. So relative to your question, that lane is as long as the lane is on Route 1, okay?
So there's nothing that if I'm sitting there wanting to turn left and get tired and say, all right, I'm gonna just go up to Ashland, I can switch lanes.
Until you get to this
That's
divide.
what I'm asking, is there a divider there? That's
Yes.
what, how far back is that divider?
That divider is
I think it's about 380 feet.
about 380 feet. So if you're familiar with the site here, it's just a little bit, maybe 50 feet beyond where this gravel parking lot is, on this parking lot here. But to your point, vehicles, again, visualizing those worst times when 95 is bogged down and you've got a lot of cars. Because many times we have people that get off at Carmel Church and then try to get back on 95. So this lane will be dedicated to that traffic so it can get back on 95. Because you can really, even though I understand the concern about one lane, but we have one lane roads where we can get 15,000 vehicles a day through those intersections. So while they're bumper to bumper, they can move very quickly when they're not impeded, to your point. And you can really pass a lot of traffic through there since we're not stopping.
How far is it when you come off of 30, to
the
turn
bridge
left?
zone.
How, then you've got that 4-foot barrier. How long is it that way before right-hand lane will come back into left? Well, if they choose to. You see what I'm asking on the other side?
That lane continues on down, you're now in your own lane. So you go, you have one lane coming from southbound that you're losing, so you're down one lane, as the gentleman mentioned. After the signal, there's 2 full lanes. So basically, once you shoot out there and take your left on Route 1,
But you're making your left, but there's still, you know.
yeah, you got your own lane, yep.
Yeah.
It's 2 lanes.
But it's not blocked.
Nope.
The right-hand side.
Only for that 150 or 200 feet, you still have the blockage to allow for acceleration. And that's the whole name of the game, because you want, 15, 20 mile per hour difference in speed is okay. Anything more than that's bad. That's why the concrete median is there to work.
That's fine.
So
And please keep in mind that this is all.
we're trying to record this so other people can benefit from it, so I won't repeat the question. But the question was, how long does this lane that heads south continue? It is essentially all of Route 1. So once you leave the intersection, you still have 2 lanes southbound on Route 1, and you continue on. You are protected for that period until you become comfortable and back up to speed travel with the adjacent lane. Yes, ma'am.
So while you're working on the project, are you gonna block off that, so we're gonna have to go around to Mount Hope Road and circle to where, we'll go along, we're gonna keep straight if you wanna go to 30, that way?
The question really relates to the construction time period. What happens when this intersection is under construction?
Yeah, when it's under.
When it's under construction, we will do a variety of things, but as part of their plan development, and we haven't decided that, we come up with a traffic management plan for construction. So it may involve a combination of what we refer to as flagger operations, where flag is self-controlled in the absence of having control unit, as well as we may have some detour times where we actually do detour and maybe augment that with flaggers. We oftentimes, too, put restrictions for work hours, so in the morning, first thing, or in the afternoon, we don't do construction. We may only work between 9 and, let's say, 3 o'clock, so that during those peak hours, we allow traffic to move more freely, and we get the main work done. There's also the possibility that we could work at nighttime for some of the operations to minimize the disruption to everyone's daily lives. And that's part of what we'll be figuring out as we finish the design of the project. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, as you make the left from Route 30 on to 1, how hard is it going to get over to that right lane to make a right onto Mount Hope Church? Because we got that free flowing traffic coming in, we need to make that right. How are we going to deal with it?
It will be just as easy as it is now with a little additional safety. I mean, the challenge is, so now when you pull out, and the question was, how easy will it be to make the left after Route 1 and then make an immediate right onto Mount Hope Church? And now with the signalized intersection, you will be able to come out under the control of the signal and also the protection of this guarded median, so your speeds can be slow without fear of being rear-ended. And then look for a clear path. You're still going to have to wait for that through traffic to provide a break for you to make the right. So
You're going to get yelled
But they're
at.
going to get it's free flowing. Right lane is free flowing. It's going to be a challenge, certain kinds of spaces, trying to get across.
it will be a challenge during certain times of the day, but it will still be a better condition than we have today. Now, we have a relatively small number of those movements, but it will require some judgment to make that right hand turn.
You don't slow that traffic down on the southbound side.
Yeah, if it stays 55.
I think, if I can take one question at a time. One of the questions was, and we will work with VDOT. It may be, by the time this project matures, VDOT determines that a reduction in the overall speed limit is appropriate. So that's another question we can record to consider. It may make sense to lower the speeds over the statutory limits. And again, happy to discuss these individually offline in more detail too when we break them in. Another question?
Yeah, so like my concern is when people from out of state are getting off on the highway at Gulf Church, and they're gonna be buzzing down here in that curve, and they're gonna have to make this decision, you know, suddenly, oh, I need to get to the right lane because that's the only one. I just feel like there's gonna be a terrible bottleneck there.
The question was, the concern is that unfamiliar drivers from out of state will be headed south and have to make a decision in which lane to get in. We acknowledge, but those decisions have to be made today. Okay, so drivers that are unfamiliar today through that intersection still have to decide to get in the left turn lane and when to turn. So we won't be able to rid ourselves of all the problems with this improvement. I acknowledge that, but it will greatly reduce some of the congestion associated with those cars because of the control of the intersection.
Mike?
But again, happy to discuss that offline. Terry, yes, ma'am.
I'm about to ask the same question. Almost when you get off 31, what happens to that street, Mount Hope Church Road that's on the left?
Right here.
Yep, but going the opposite way. Yep, coming down.
Side.
Yeah, that side.
Yeah,
The houses
the
down.
question was with regard to Mount Hope Church Road on both sides of Route 1, both east and west, what happens to that road? And we are not proposing to make any changes to that roadway. So access will continue to be the same access as you have today. Yes, sir.
Do you have any metric on the traffic using Mount Hope Church Road for at that intersection?
Yeah, we have counts for that.
Because, a lot of homes are getting built, a lot of people are using that road. I look at the plan, your whole plan fails on Mount Hope Church Road. Whether you turn south off 30, or whether your bypass is coming from the north. No matter what happens, someone turn into Mount Hope Church Road, it's going to back up everything that you're trying to alleviate.
Well, I'd like to discuss it with you offline perhaps and get your perception.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'd like to discuss that offline with you so we can record some of your observations and understand how we might.
I don't put on, you guys are engineers, you should have that.
We do have those counts to answer that question. Another question? Yes, sir.
You're creating a free flow lane for going south, but if you're going north and you're not turning on Route 30, you're now going to have a red light, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there any concern about that creating a backup?
The question was, with regard to the northbound movements on Route 1, is there any concern about creating an additional backup on Route 1? And we would acknowledge stoplights stop traffic and therefore create backups, but it's a trade-off where the signal timing will balance those impedances or stoppage so that people that do have to stop going northbound, one, they will continue to have 2 lanes, okay, which passes a lot of traffic. And the signal timing, the goal will be to limit that amount of time so that that backup doesn't occur too significantly. Again, we'll be balancing with the timing, and this is something that will change over time with conditions. VDOT will be in a position to change that timing, but we're trying to unload Route 30 and keep the other legs of the intersection moving as well. So that'll have to be looked at continuously to balance it, so we don't have excessive backups on one leg or the other. Other questions?
One more. The length of the separation heading southbound on Route 1 before you get to Route 30, heading south, right there, is that long enough, given that you're in a slight curve?
We believe it is. I mean, again, I think we have to depend on our roadway designers, but I think back to the question before, you have 2 lanes coming south on Route 1, and there will be some decision for some drivers, they'll want to move out of the left-bound lane and move to the right-bound lane because their intent is not to turn left at the intersection. So if we extend this too far back, we unreasonably restrict people from being able to shift over to the right lane so they can pass through. But there is a balance between separating the traffic and allowing the traffic to go from the left lane to the right lane. Other questions? And again, we've got some display boards. We're happy to, we want to hear your comments because we learn from those comments, things like Untitled Church Road and the interactions you can observe, Shortcut Road. We want to hear that stuff so we can consider it and see how it factors in. So we'll have these boards or other plans and the county staff and our consultants, if you just raise your hand again so people know who they can approach to talk about the project. We'll be kind of writing these things down and keeping track of them as part of their notes. And again, we're very appreciative that you took the time to come out tonight, and we're looking forward to boiling all this down and coming back to you with the results.
So the corner, so you're on 30 heading north on Route 1. That corner for years has had signs like there's going to be some sort of development there. Is there potential for development there? Will that change the flow if that gets developed?
The answer to that is potentially, if it were developed, it would change the flow. That's a separate process, though, dealt with during zoning and development times where developments are required to look at the impacts of traffic from their development and possibly make improvements. So that's a little bit of a separate item that is considered. And again, the Ruritan was so gracious to provide refreshments tonight. Many thanks, as always, the guest hosts. And if I could, I'd like to have a round of applause for the Ruritan.